changing my courses for a while. I was tired of looking at students' faces, sitting in my classroom. I'm a creative person, and this was not fulfilling my creativity. So I knew I wanted to do something different. So I did the FDI, and I started to think about developing a new course. It would be a course that would attract students from across disciplines, social sciences, regular sciences, arts and humanities. And I wanted the students to learn from doing, and I wanted them to learn from each other. And I realized that to do this, I had to have a shift in my thinking. If I truly wanted students and to push them to, and who they need to be resourceful, self-driving, and collaborative, meant that I had to shift the way I teach. And so as I was developing this course, I realized quite quickly that I would have to radically change the way I saw my role in the classroom. It wasn't going to be about standing in front of a bunch of faces and lecturing. It was going to be about shifting to being a facilitator. I had to be flexible and find ways for my students to help promote student agency, as well as helping them welcome the unknowns. It also meant that I had to rethink my role in the classroom, but also to rethink about covering as much content as possible. This was not the objective I wanted to achieve. What I needed to do is to engage the students to own their learning. I had to promote them and support their efforts to discover the concepts on their own. It wasn't about me having all the answers. It was about me having the questions to help the students find the answers themselves. I also had to give some control. I had to accept the fact that this might not work, right? That's a tough one. And in doing that, I had to think more about my roles, and I had to model for my students what it means to take on new roles and take chances. I had to encourage these students, from the very beginning, I had to hook them to let them know that this was not going to be like their typical course. They were going to sit and look at me for 10 weeks, and that I needed to change up a lot of things. I also, go back a second. I also, what I did in the very beginning, after I hooked the students to think about the class and thinking about it in a new way, is that I immediately had to put the students into positions. I had to form these teams. Well, how did I do that? Well, I had the students apply for the positions, and I had them tell me about the environmental issue they were most passionate about. And then I had to strategically and thoughtfully put these interdisciplinary teams together. And the teams had positions like project manager, creative director, archivist, and communications coordinator, which is Janie Fine, who's entering the head of our dining services. They also had to document the project. They had to document throughout, and they also, at the end of the project, would do a presentation. And in the presentation, they had to reflect on what they did, and they also had to reflect on what they would do different. But most importantly, they had to reflect on what would they do if they had more time. And that was okay. They didn't have to finish it all in 10 weeks. And part of that was getting students to understand that the creative practice is about growth, evolution, facing challenges, welcoming the unknown, and also not being afraid to fail. And that was really important. And it was important to understand that those skills are transferable, that these things also impact various situations, our other professions, and of course, our daily way of life. I also did not want to take the approach of assigning students a project, assigning them a topic to do a research paper on. Rather, I wanted the students to discover the research on their own. I wanted the students to experience it, to find the research necessary to get their message across. I wanted them to collect data and make that data visible. And again, they had to document it throughout the process, including their concept sketches, photographs of the installation, and many other components that were critical to tell the story of how this project came to be. And it's also important for them to think about how this would impact the community that they are in. It also was not going to be about sitting and taking notes in a passive fashion. I wanted the students to experience the learning directly and develop their own content. We used Google Sites, which allowed the students to collaborate outside the classroom. It was also a space where they could post their research, which they'd done collaboratively, assigning certain students to research certain topics. They also kept a calendar where they would write down the task, what they were going to do, when it was done. And there also was a blog that they would work on throughout the course, but it also allowed me a chance to sort of look in and see how it was going. What were the frustrations? What were the confusions? What were the tensions? And it's really important to know when to jump in and when to let them be uncomfortable. And this is probably the one skill I'm really working on and continue to work on. They also had to make the information available through social media. They got to choose the format they wanted, Twitter, Instagram. Some of them used it also to do informal surveys. I also had to rethink the classroom. It's boring looking, right? I wanted the classroom to turn into an incubator of ideas, where they could prototype what they were intending to do on the campus. But most importantly, I wanted them to see the campus as an extension of the classroom. And at the end of the project, for 3 days, the project, it was 7 weeks of working. It was 3 days of installing these projects. It was about talking to members of the campus community to see and try to get their message across. It was also about seeing it in real time, if it was being effective. And what was really great is the students had fun, they worked hard, and they found their self-motivation. And for a lot of students, this collaborative process was a real eye-opener. So what's brewing? Well, after doing the FDI, I was very fortunate to get resources to travel to the D School at Stanford, MIT, Rhode Island School of Design, and Olin College of Engineering, and to bring that information back, particularly things around design thinking. I also was able to travel to the South by Southwest Education Conference to meet other innovators working across different age groups. And this past March, I was very fortunate enough to travel back to Austin and present my research. And last year, I did a zone of inquiry, which allowed me to pilot a future course I'm developing on arts, technology, and design challenges, which I'm pretty excited about. So I now have learned to embrace these shifts. And I've also realize that I want to continue to be a great facilitator. And what I need to do that, and what I need to do is to also learn things like behavioral psychology and behavioral management. How do people think and work together? And I've also learned to embrace these critical shifts. And so my message to you is let the shift happen.